all to jump on the call. I will start by giving a brief overview of our distinguished speakers, and they will tell the story that is really remarkable. I can tell you that Michael's story, I think, is something we'll talk about in a second, is just amazing. As well as Jerel, but Michael has done amazing things in his career. So Michael Bronfein here is a serial entrepreneur, I would say, investor focused on innovation and competitive advantage in healthcare services, healthcare technologies, software, and distribution. He basically took a company. Why is my, He basically took one pharmacy, I believe in Maryland was the first one,
yes,
into $1 billion business. Now, that's one hell of an achievement, and that's just one of the things. At some point, he built a private equity that ended up managing, I believe, $3 or $4 billion. He's a true visionary. He's known for assembling high effective management teams, like Jerel here, that result in market-leading, high-growth organization with clear brand propositions and strong financial returns. He founded, as I said, he co-founded, invested in, and rapidly grown a number of leading healthcare service companies, including the company I was referring to, Neighbor Care, Remedy Senior Care, and Sterling Partners, which is the private equity I was referring to. He was awarded the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award in '94 for his development of the Neighbor Care business model and brand. Prior to that, he led commercial finance lending for Signet Bank. Since Curio Wellness first sales, Michael has driven the firm to ship more than 9,000 pounds of cannabis flower and sell more than 900,000 cannabis-infused products, serving the needs of more than 100,000 clients. We have with us Jerel, who's the managing director of the fund. Is responsible for executing the fund's mandate to generate excellence, financial returns for fund investors by enabling the success of diverse, and that's an interesting, by the way, model, franchise partners of Curio Wellness through prudent access to capital. He specializes in driving financial, organizational, and analytical initiatives designed to maximize cash flow and value to investors. Before that, he led private consulting firm that worked with small to medium-sized businesses to drive financial and operational improvements, spending most of his career in private equity and entrepreneurial ventures. And he began at GE Commercial Finance in JP Morgan. So good morning, Michael. Good morning, Jerel. And I'm so happy to have you with us here today. And you are speaking with us from?
Baltimore, Maryland.
Great. So good morning. I believe that I was just saying before we started, that first of all, family offices, I believe, are very, why am I not looking to the camera, are very quick to respond to trends. I think they were the first to get into cannabis. They were the first to get into opportunity zone. They were the first to get into blockchain, and in a smart way. Not in the, I think, the way the masses would look at blockchain, for instance. And I think we'll talk soon about the industry of cannabis as well, because obviously it's gone, the bubble bursted, and I believe that those that stayed are the real players that people look at. And I've seen many cannabis companies. It's not too many that you see where the founder is an amazing entrepreneur that built $1 billion business in the retail. So, Michael, I would love for you to share with us your background, how it evolved, the business, the pharmacy that grew up to become $1 billion business with, I believe it was your brother-in-law, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And how you ended up here. I mean, we'll get to that in a second, how you ended up with your daughter building a cannabis company. But first, if you can share with us your story.
Oh, thank you, Danny, and thank you for giving us this opportunity today. Jerel and I are very excited to tell our story. I have a pretty interesting background in that I grew up in a family supermarket business. My uncle, my grandfather were merchants. They taught me how to be a merchant. But along the way, I decided that I didn't really want to be a merchant, particularly in retail food. And I had been fortunate to go to college, become an accountant, and earn a CPA. And that led me to a career in commercial banking, which over a very short period of time, I evolved from a trainee to run the Maryland operations of what was called Signet Bank, and then to be the chief commercial lending officer for the bank, and sat on their executive committee. And that was a great experience because it gave me the opportunity to see thousands and thousands of businesses and discern what made successful versus not successful businesses in the same exact industry. There might have been 50 paper and janitorial supply distributors in our markets, which were the Mid-Atlantic, but only 2 or 3 were really successful. And the thing that struck me about all of them was they had 2 things that always made them successful. One were great people that executed, people that had discipline, people that focus, and people that had personal accountability. And secondly, they focused on customers. What did the customer want? What did the customer need? And how were they anticipating that before the customer even knew it? And that really became the basis for my first company, which was called Neighbor Care. It was originally started as a single drugstore. I was actually a young commercial banker at the time when I opened it. I had no aspirations to do anything except make a few bucks to be able to send my young first child to college. Wasn't sure what a banking career would evolve to and what it would provide. But I quickly began to see opportunity in what customers wanted, and particularly how people were then dealing with something called a new place called managed care. Back in the early 80s, managed care was really quite young and was evolving quite rapidly. And I suggested to my partner that rather than competing against Walgreens and Rite Aid and CVS, we should take an alternative approach and kind of, as I like to say, fish in the barrel by putting pharmacies in medical office buildings that were slowly evolving to take care of this new payer class called managed care. We quickly began to learn what people wanted, what they didn't, what the payers wanted, what they didn't, what the physicians wanted, they didn't, and we crafted offerings that were very, very attractive. The byproduct of that was we began to realize that there was a different kind of service model that could succeed, and that required integration of various types of pharmacy services. So we wanted to provide pharmacy that would occur from the time a patient left the hospital so they no longer needed pharmaceutical care. So at nursing homes, at assisted living, home care with assistance, and then traditional retail pharmacy. And so we set about building a model that not only could provide all those different types of pharmaceutical care, but did them in an integrated manner with a strong database of information, which gave us a competitive advantage. So back in the early 90s, we made a big investment in data systems and data sets to be able to really understand behaviors and use those behaviors to improve outcomes and lower costs. In 1991, I left the bank. I was at a crossroads. They wanted to make me the next president, or I could take this little $12 million revenue company my brother-in-law and I had built, and we could turn it into something. So I decided to take the leap and become an entrepreneur. At the time, we were doing about 12 million in revenues, making about $1 million a year. When I left as CEO 7.5 years later, or almost 8 years later, we were doing 1.1 billion in revenues, and we made 120 million. That was about 50% derived from organic growth and 50% through a number of acquisitions that we executed on. And I'm proud to say that when I left that business, it enjoyed the reputation as really the innovator and market leader in long-term care pharmacy in the United States. We were actually second in market share, but we were number 1 in preference as an employer and as the brand of choice in the markets we were in. We just weren't as in many markets as our number 1 competitor. I leveraged the proceeds of that business into a private equity firm called Sterling Partners, where I partnered with some guys that I knew well from Baltimore and Chicago who had been in the education investing business. I brought healthcare and I led that. We grew from no institutional funding to over 4 billion under management, and I spent about 13 years there. Our investor group achieved about a 5x on our healthcare investments during that period of time. And during that tenure, I backed up a couple of my former colleagues in Neighbor Care in a new pharmacy business which exploited an idea that we had at NeighborCare, but the buyers didn't choose to undertake because it was a very disruptive business model and technology. That idea today is known as Remedy Senior Care. We invented the world's only high-speed robotic technology, and much like the model we built here in Curio, we have a track record and a playbook of envisioning a new innovative approach to consumer or business needs, and we build that model out in a single place. We get it to the point where all the operating metrics, all of the consumer demand metrics, and all of the profitability metrics are proven. And then once we do that, we then to stamp it out very quickly. So we invented the robots. We got the robot to work in Maryland very, very effectively on every dimension of measurement that we had sought. And today there are 9 regional distribution centers around the country in our company. I'm still a large shareholder in that company. We did bring private equity in to expand and raise $300 million in 2012. But today we're the fastest growing institutional pharmacy in America. We've had a just under 25% CAGR in our revenues over the last 5 years, which, if you know the pharmacy business, is one where actually prices have been going down for traditional drugs that are used in nursing homes and assisted living because of generics. That's really one of the places where Jerel and I spent a lot of time together back in the early part of the I guess teens of this decade, and that has led to a company that today does over $500 million and has operating statistics that are best in class in the industry. So then in 2012, I decided it was time for me to basically set up my own family office, which I did in Florida, and still pursued some real estate investing and managing my own investments. But in 2013, my oldest daughter, who had recently graduated from NYU's MBA program and was a senior producer for NBC, decided that she wanted to become entrepreneurial. And she called me about entering the medicinal cannabis industry because Maryland was going to start an industry. My initial reaction was, no way, no interest, not interested at all, call somebody else. But she is a Bronfein, which makes her persistent and also understands that, you sell based on facts, not on emotion. So she did a great research project and brought it to me and showed me that there was true medicinal value in cannabis. I validated that with a neuroscientist that's now one of our scientific advisors, Dr. Solomon Snyder. But she made the case that we could create safe, effective, and reliable products from the cannabis plant if we undertook building a company that was effectively consistent with the FDA regime for cultivation and manufacturing of botanically based pharmaceutical products. So that's what we did. We envisioned Curio Wellness. We built a facility in Baltimore that is unique in the industry. It's a fully lean managed manufacturing and cultivation facility, but more importantly, it is GMP certified, which is the standard that the FDA requires to make drugs in the United States. And we staffed it with not one person from the cannabis industry. There's no one in our business today at the senior or medium or mid level who comes from the cannabis industry. You may ask why. Well, the reason is we wanted to look forward, not backward, and we didn't want all of the myths, the biases, the experiences of people from the illicit market or even from the legitimate market in the western part of the United States to really interfere with our innovation. And so we hired best of breed people from traditional industrial ag, from pharmaceutical manufacturing, and from other places, retailing, that they had a proven track record of experience. We also were, at the time, probably the single biggest capital raise that occurred. In 2015, we raised $30 million in equity in about 2 weeks. My partners and I were $6 million of that, and then we raised $24 million in limited partnerships interest today. In that period of time, we built the most sophisticated plant. It's a 60,000 square foot, $22 million investment, and it was if you build it, they will come theory at the time. We were able to, again, at that facility, plan out or prove out rather all of the operating metrics of the business model that we had envisioned, which results in one very robust gross profit margins, very robust operating margins, and more importantly, a number one brand and a number one market share, which we enjoy in Maryland as a result of, really disciplined execution against that business plan. So today, we are the number one flower producer in Maryland, and we've won awards for best flower in Maryland. But more importantly, we're the number one manufactured products manufacturer in Maryland, and we enjoy a number one brand preference. 92% of the patients in Maryland, of which are 109,000 today, prefer our brand over the next closest, which has a 59% preference. And so we're very fact-focused, we're very data-focused, and we've built a company now that is ready to expand nationally. And we're going to do that in two ways. We're here to talk today about our retail expansion and the funding that we are going to bring to that, but we're also about to expand our wholesale operation into Florida, New Jersey, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And we'll be doing a large capital raise for that either later this year or early next year. But turning to this, in 2018, it became very clear to me that the retailers who embraced this industry and wanted to be part of its rapid growth and innovation, by and large, had no experience in retailing. Didn't understand customers, didn't understand operating systems, didn't understand regulatory oversight, didn't understand the financial model. And I know this because we service every single dispensary in the state of Maryland today, or over 90, and we saw them open and evolve. And we opened our own dispensary in March of 2018. We actually launched the industry in December of 17, and we're the very, very first and only wholesaler for about a month and a half, and then others began to join us. And as we watched our wellness center evolve very rapidly, we watched others not evolve rapidly, who were in equally as good socioeconomic areas, who had equally as good traffic patterns, who had all of the things that you would think in a retail operation would lead to rapid growth in a rapidly growing industry. But yet they weren't. There was only a handful of us, about 20%, that were really flourishing. So it made me realize that that there was a need for business systems and marketing and finance and regulatory oversight. And so we began doing the spade work on a franchise of our wellness center under the same exact playbook that we did with the robots, the same one we did with Sterling, and the same one we did with Neighbor Care, which is we envision a model, we open it, we prove the metrics, we alter our activities if they need to be altered, and we get it to the point where it is highly predictable, which is where we are today with our wellness center. But there was another thing that we observed in the marketplace, which was a lack of diversity. Most of the folks in our business were not women, they were not minorities, they were white guys who had the money and the desire to get into this. So I called a good friend of mine who's a business partner of mine in real estate, a guy named Theo Rogers, and I said, I have this crazy idea and I want to run it by you. And I said, I think that we're going to be launching this franchising program, and we, I think, can make a difference in the communities in which we're going to operate by providing financing in both debt and equity through a private equity fund model to women and minorities who are more than qualified to be able to run these, but don't have the business system readily in place and don't have the capital access to do it. And so we've spent the better part of a year and a half preparing for this launch, which will be officially announced September 15th, both the fund and the franchising. There's a gentleman named Andy Cohen who was the CEO of our number one competitor, the number two company in Maryland. You may recall I said that we're number one in Maryland, which we are. We're twice as big as our next closest competitor, which was Grassroots. They were sold recently to a company called Curaleaf. And when that sale was announced, I approached Andy and said, Andy, I want you to come be my partner and run this free franchise opportunity and open up 100 to 200 units over the next 36 months. And so he obviously agreed because he's here now. In addition, when he learned about the WMBE fund, he actually wanted to invest himself, much like myself and Theo have. So he's committed $500,000 of his own money to the fund. So that's how we've gotten here. And our goal is really to be the market leader in safe, effective, and reliable medicinal products derived from cannabis. We don't view ourselves as a cannabis company. We view ourselves as a healthcare company that is innovating through the use of this really robust plant that has many, many chemical compounds that we think will improve pain, sleep, anxiety, nausea, so forth. In fact, I'm proud to tell you that simultaneous with this call, our scientific advisory board is having its quarterly meeting because we're about to launch a sleep product in Maryland and then in the other states we go into that has been clinically trialed. It's the first product that I'm aware of in the United States that actually had a FDA style clinical trial. The FDA won't actually participate in the trial at this point, but it's taken under that guise. So I think that hopefully answers your question, but I'm happy to follow up if you'd like.
Then how would it actually work? You're talking about minorities, you're talking about women. How would it work really? They are getting a franchise. How are they going to finance that? How are they buying themselves out later on? If you can share the story behind that.
Yes. So when I looked at the financing mechanism, it was clear to me that in order to be able to do this, the fund owners would need to participate in the economic growth of the particular location, and by having a portfolio of locations, you would minimize risk of anyone failing or any other issues in a market. And so we modeled out what we thought was a relatively conservative approach to growing in a dispensary in any single location. And from that, we derived what percentage of that location would have to be owned by the fund on day one, and what percentage of that would be owned by the franchisee that would give them both majority control, which is important from a political perspective, but would also assure that there was enough profits to give the fund a very good PE risk-adjusted return. And so we derived a formula that says that the franchise, the build out of the location, the working capital, and the inventory is a $600,000 investment. A non-WMBE fund investor or franchisee will pay us $40,000 and will pay us a 6% royalty from day one on their sales, and we'll build out the facility and bring all of our operating systems and procedures and training to it. But fundamentally, they'll bring the capital, including the $40,000 franchising fee. In our case, the $40,000 weight, in the case of the fund, the $40,000 franchising fee becomes the capital investment that the franchisee has to put in. So we waive that franchise fee from the franchisor and make it a capital investment. Then the fund lends to the franchisee $320,000 at a 4% fixed rate of interest, and that loan is repaid from the profits of the dispensary itself. We also waive the franchise fee for the first $2 million of revenues. We then charge 2% from $2 to $4 million in revenue, and then 4% thereafter. When the fund is bought out, then the franchisee will pay the full 6%. So we've aligned all of the data, all the costs, if you will, of the debt and the franchise fee to help improve the probability that the franchisee who's being funded by the fund will be successful. The fund will then invest side by side with that $240,000 and will own 40% of the store. At the earlier of 3 years, I should say at the earliest of 3 years, the franchisee can call the equity of the fund and repay us based on 6.5 times their trailing EBITDA. And if they have not saved up enough money to do so from their profits, then the fund will lend them the balance at 8%, more of a market rate, if you will, but still very attractive. And during this entire period, the fund will have a first lien and priority security interest in both the license and the lease. So as a result, we're very well protected from a collateral standpoint. And the franchise agreement in this particular case gives us the ability to remove the franchisee if they're not performing well and put in a different franchisee. So we really do control the location and all aspects of it through the franchising agreement until such time is the fund is fully repaid. And so we think the fund at a minimum will provide for 40 franchisees, but more likely 50, because in the $30 million that we're raising, $3 million put up by me and $27 million being raised through limited partnership interest, we will be, there's a $6 million piece of that fund, which is for supplemental working capital in case anybody takes longer to cure than we believe. We didn't need that at our own store, and most stores in Maryland didn't need that. And remember, we were in this business from day one while we were building patient count. Today, there's 109,000 people, and it's growing 3,000 a month. So it would be more analogous to us opening up a dispensary in Florida or New Jersey or Ohio or Missouri or Michigan, where the programs are already existing and where we have access to licenses. So we're pretty confident that the majority of the folks are going to want to buy us out sooner than later, because it's in their self-interest to do so. Obviously, the longer they wait, theoretically, the more profit they'll have to pay us. But in the maximum, we have a put after 7 years. So this is a limited life financing vehicle. It's not meant to go beyond the 10 years of its life, might go into 11. But our goal is really to put out the money with franchisees over about a 3-year period. We think 10 to 20% of the money will be put out in 2021, 40% to 50% in the following year, and then the remainder in the year after that, as we build momentum and we go to more locations. But in all cases, we will be bought out of each of those opportunities by the 7th year of the operation. So you have rolling money in and rolling money out. And in the interim, there'll be multiple sources of revenue. The interest on the loan will be a source of revenue that'll be paid quarterly. You'll have the profits from the store that'll be distributed back to the fund holders. And then, of course, once you have the buyout, that'll come in a bolus. So after about the first year, we expect cash to be flowing both ways, in and out.
And may I ask, why minorities? Why women? Is it the social impact element together with the fact that you think they will care more to make this business work? And have you seen any similar model anywhere else? In any other sector? It doesn't need to be in this sector.
So let me answer your first question. The social impact is really not about social impact. It's about doing the right things in the community. My wife and I have our own foundation, and we believe that those who have should be giving back. But more importantly, we have observed in the marketplace that regulators and politicians are putting pressure on the industry to increase diversity. There just hasn't been adequate diversity in the industry because there hasn't been access to capital. And so we thought, as we franchised, this would be a good way for us to contribute to really demonstrating to the marketplace through a leadership move how this could be done. And our hope, honestly, is that there's other funds that are formed and there's other folks that are out there that are multi-state operators who will undertake a similar approach. We will be first to market, which I believe will give us a huge competitive advantage. But fundamentally, it's around just bringing more diversity to the industry because it's truly needed.
Thank you. And looking at your future growth plans, what's the plan currently? I mean, you mentioned a little bit. Obviously, you're going to grow beyond Maryland. How does that look like? What's the goal?
So with respect to our franchise, we've identified 9 states that have very, very attractive characteristics. First of all, they're medicinal. Secondly, they have limited licenses. Thirdly, they have broad categories of products that you can provide, flower being most important because that's your early cash crop in this business. And fourthly, the ease of access to both physicians and patients is very good. So those 9 states was where we'll be expanding and franchising initially. At the same time, our wholesale business will be expanding in Florida and New Jersey this year, or we believe this year. Florida is a definite. New Jersey we have to be awarded, but we're also talking to companies in Ohio and Pennsylvania about acquiring them for expansion. But the retail business is not dependent on our wholesale business. And even in our own wellness center in Maryland, we limit the amount of product that we sell to between 30 and 35% because we want to make sure that patients have what they want, not what we make. And that has led us to be extremely successful in our existing retail center.
Very interesting. Thank you for this. And by the way, what's the minimum investment we're looking at if somebody wants
the minimum investment is $250,000. I think it might be helpful, Jerel, if you might walk folks just briefly through a couple of slides that explain the mechanism and the money flows and so forth, because it is unique. It's a novel approach, and it's, in this case, I think a picture's worth 1,000 words.
And by the way, I will just say that after that, we will talk about 2 interesting topics that I think a lot of people would care about, which is what's going on in the cannabis industry and what's going on with COVID and how that, the implications everywhere. But first, let's look at your information, Jerel.
Sure. Danny, are you able to enable screen sharing quickly? And I'll picture worth 1,000 words. So we'll.
Of course, I thought it was enabled. So I really thought it was enabled. So give me a minute to find that out. Maybe while I'm doing that, before we jump into to that, maybe Michael, you can just give us, Michael and Jerel, your point of view about the cannabis industry. That's obviously was the hottest thing 2 years ago or so when it started, and I. We came from Israel, so Israel is a major name in that space. There was a bubble. I remember we worked a lot in Canada. The prices went crazy. It bursted. A lot of people, I think, a year ago were very scared to see what's going on, waiting to see what's going on. So what do you see now happening in the cannabis industry? I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
So I gave a talk to a wealth management firm in October of 2018, where I spoke about the bubble and why I believe it existed. And that related to the fact that many cannabis companies in the early days focused on getting as many flags in the map as possible. In other words, they wanted licenses in multiple states. And they didn't focus on building strong operating models that were well capitalized and proved out their thesis. And so there was a lot of activity, but there wasn't a lot of good execution. Very few. There were a few really good companies like GTI, like Cureleaf, to name 2 that I happen to respect. But the majority were like, well, we'll get licenses, we'll raise more money at a higher valuation, blah blah blah. It looked to me very much like the tech bubble of '99 to 2001, which I was part of and lived in. So I looked at kind of where we were and where we should be as a company, and I call our company part of Cannabis 2.0. Cannabis 2.0, which we're now in, is about execution and about the same operating metrics that any other company would be held to account for in the public or private markets. Is revenue growing? Are your margins at or where you say they're going to be? Is your return on invested capital commensurate to the risk you're taking? And now you're beginning to see that. In fact, in the last quarter, the second quarter results for the 5 best cannabis companies were all exceeded analyst expectations. And as a result, you've seen a pretty significant acceleration back into the space by public company investors. The good news for our company is we've been enjoying those margins pretty much since we started. You can go back and track, but today we enjoy 40% operating margins and 25% pre-tax margins, and those I believe are going to grow as we continue to grow here in Maryland, and as we move to Florida and New Jersey, that are even bigger markets where we can get more operating leverage out of our assets. We think ultimately we'll be looking at 50% operating incomes and 35% pre-tax income margins. The good news here is that the COVID has been an accelerator of acceptance. So there's been a real shift that's occurred at the state government level with the pandemic, where, as I said earlier, 20 of the 33 states that are legal have been deemed essential and therefore have stayed open the entire time. Our company being one of them. We saw, for example, in our retail store, our average transaction go from $109 to $135 over the last 4 months. That's a very material increase per transaction. And when I look at my wholesale customers across the state of Maryland, I've seen the same kind of increase in per size orders going out the door each week. And candidly, we have just gone through a big expansion on our manufacturing side, and we're now seeing, basically everything we can make in this increased capacity being sold, and we're about to undertake a $15 million expansion in our cultivation facility, which will go online probably by the fourth quarter of next year. And we think that investment, which will be $15 to $20 million, will add about 50 million of potential revenues over the next 3 years and about 30 million in EBITDA, from that expansion. So the market is very robust, particularly baby boomers, who are our target market, are really embracing medicinal cannabis and cannabis in general as a product to help them deal with insomnia and sleep, with chronic pain, with nausea, anxiety, inflammation. Those are the places where we see increasing amounts. Interestingly, when we wrote our business plan in 2015, we forecast that after 5 years in business, we wanted 90% of our revenues to come from manufactured products and 10% to come from flower. And we're already at 60% coming from manufactured products and 40% coming from flower after being operational for 2 years and 9 months. So the market has grown much faster than we had forecasted, but because we foresaw that a large capacity and operating leverage would be a competitive advantage, and we invested early, we've been able to stay ahead of the market in terms of availability of product and market share. But more importantly, because of our approach, we just have better quality and more consistent products, which is why the consumers are buying them in disproportionate quantities.
Thank you. And Jerel, I believe now you are free to do.
We are free.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining and for your interest. We really appreciate this time with you. We wanted to talk a little bit about how the fund will work in terms of providing support to a wellness center franchise partner. It all starts in understanding the 4 main constituencies that make for a successful store. First is the what I call the wholesaler, right? So our mothership, so Curio Wellness itself, providing leading high quality products into the market and really generating a broad-based national brand, right? The second component is Curio Retail Services. So the division of Curio that provides the operational support that you typically expect from a franchise, but also those additional supports that just come from working with an experienced player in the industry as it evolves, right? Additionally, the fund provides that financial component of support, enabling a franchise partner to have access to capital in a marketplace where traditional banking isn't fully available as yet, right? And that final component is the franchise partner themselves, who will, as an owner-operator, really build a relationship with the communities in which their store is located. So focusing in on the structure of the deal itself, as Michael mentioned, we think of the budget as required for an initial store being $600,000. 40% of that represented in an equity ownership stake in the store itself, and the remaining $360,000 coming in a combination of the franchise partner's $40,000 contribution, as well as a loan for $320,000 directly to that franchisee. The franchisee will, their portion of the earnings of the store, so 60% of the cash distributions from the store will go into escrow, and the only outflows from that escrow account are to cover any tax liabilities generated in the operation of the store and to pay down that initial loan. As that loan is satisfied, cash will accumulate in that escrow account and essentially form a down payment for the buyout of the fund's ownership by the franchisee. The idea is over the course of 5 years to have that franchisee in a position where they can purchase the 40% interest held by the store and own the store 100% as a successful franchisee of Curio Wellness. All right. This slide, there's a lot of numbers on the slide, but we really do like to emphasize the way that we've built this model is intended to position the franchisee for success. So if we focus in on that EBITDA line about midway down the page, the intention is within that green column to have the franchisee in a position to buy out the fund's interest as the store is generating enough capital to really accommodate the buyout value, the value of the business at the buyout. So we think of it as if we value the store at 6.5 times its EBITDA, its trailing EBITDA, based on 680,000. That's about a little less than $4.5 million valuation. The fund's interest would be about $1.7 million. As you can see in the subsequent years, if we decide to structure the exit as a loan, the fund is the store itself, the franchisee is generating enough cash to pay down that loan with its internal cash flow. Michael mentioned, so I'll just briefly move through these slides, the different sources of income to the fund based mostly on the interest generated by the lending activity that the fund provides to the franchisees. Really, the goal is to make sure that capital is not what inhibits the success of the franchisee. The additional revenue streams are tied to the equity position of the fund in each store. So we'll capture 40% of any cash distributions from the store while the fund owns 40% of it. And then additionally, as kind of a milestone in the life of that store, the fund will be bought out eventually by the franchisee, and that will represent a significant bolus of capital coming back to the fund. In terms of understanding the life of a unit, Denny pointed out that our minimum investment is $250,000. That capital is drawn over the course of 3 years in this modeled scenario. So this is a fairway expectation of how we will launch stores. So in year 1, if we launch 5 stores, we would call our unit holders for the first $38,000 of their investment to fund the build out of those first 5 stores. Similarly, in year 2, if we were to launch the next 14 to 15 stores, we'd call for another $71,000, and in year 3, the balance of the capital. In this scenario, we just wanted to model the minimum performance we expect from the fund, so 40 stores over the course of 3 years, and understand that that provides an attractive opportunity for our investors. So in this scenario, as we launch the stores, beginning in year 4, we would start to see cash flow coming back into the fund in a way that allows us to begin distributing capital back to our investors. First, the 6% preferred return that we pay on held capital, on called capital, and then we return the initial capital investment made by each investor until about midway through year 7, we'll have returned the initial investment, and at that point, the fund is in a profit position and we'll be distributing really the upside of your investment. The net result is that over the course of 10 years, in this minimal scenario based on our expectation that a store really kind of meet our minimum performance standard, we'll be able to return about 3 times our capital, right? With the expectation that as stores either outperform or as stores perform per plan and we're able to release some of that reserve capital, we'll be able to boost the number of stores we put into the world. And that would accrue directly to the returns of the fund, since we're simply putting our capital to the best use.
Excuse me for 1 second. Would you go back to the slide that shows the performance of a store? So just to give everyone a sense, this 5-year plan is in our view, both realistic and frankly conservative. Our wellness center, which has been open since March 3rd of 2018, or it's just about to have its 30th month birthday, is actually achieving the results in year 9 on this chart. So we'll do just north of $7 million in revenues this year, and make the EBITDA number there about. That's our current run rate. So there's a huge upside, if you will, in my view, in terms of both the performance opportunity of the stores, as well as what Jerel just talked about, which is the fact that we only put 40 stores in that model, and there's $6 million of unapplied capital. So if we only use half of that, that's 5 additional stores for which the fund will get the benefit of its 40% ownership interest. So there's multiple levers for improving outcomes. But having been in the private equity business for a long time and raised a lot of institutional money, I'm more comfortable kind of under promising and over delivering. I don't like not meeting our numbers, and so I've beaten Jerel into submission on these lower numbers, but he'll get over it when he sees the smiles of happy investors.
Thank you. And we have lots of questions, but one of them here that I see. If you have any intentions to franchise in LA, Colombia.
LA is not on our current list. The 9 states that we have identified are all east of the Mississippi. So Illinois, Michigan, Massachusetts, Ohio, Missouri, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and Florida. We find that the operations east of the Mississippi are a little less chaotic than operations west of the Mississippi, that the regulatory regimes are a little bit more mature, and candidly are more functional and less dysfunctional in terms of how they operate. I talked to a lot of folks that I know in both California, Nevada, and also Colorado, and they're having great difficulty really making money because of a lot of dysfunctional aspects of those markets, whereas people like us in the United States are enjoying very, very robust profitability, both at the retail and the wholesale level.
And yeah, Jerel, by the way, you see, we have some questions here. So those that you feel like you can answer privately, feel free to do that. Those that you think are more for everybody, like one question here is, how will you reach women and minorities? How are you going to market that? How are you going to get to them in the different places you're going to?
So our model is really focuses on pharmacist-led. It's a clinical model, and I'm in the pharmacy business, so I can tell you this. Over the last 20 years, the number of pharmacies, schools in the United States has doubled the output, yet the demand for pharmacists has dropped dramatically for a variety of reasons I won't get into. So today, a retail pharmacist working for a Rite Aid or CVS or Walgreens makes less than they did working for me in Neighbor Care in 1995. And yet there was a very large population of entrepreneurial pharmacists that created your local community pharmacies. So we think they will be a very large percentage of our applicants. In addition, the majority of the graduates in the last 10 years from the United States pharmacy schools have been women and minorities. So there's a very fertile and large population out there. We'll be announcing the launch of the fund and the franchising program nationally. We're using a top 5 PR firm called BCW out of DC, and we have a full marketing program for introducing this. But candidly, I believe this will be, kind of top of the fold news in our industry. And in general, we've had a number of state regulators who we've talked to who have been very interested in this and very, very supportive of it. In fact, we filed last Monday for a legislative change in New Jersey to allow us to have 10 franchisees instead of 5, which is what we would be limited to. And Senator Troy Singleton from New Jersey was enthusiastic to be the sponsor of that bill. We were able to get legislation changed in Maryland to go from having one owner, one dispensary, to one owner, 4 dispensaries, to enable the fund to be able to do that here. In Florida, there is no limit on dispensaries. So as we go into that state in 2021, the first thing we'll be doing is building out retail stores. And there's no limit on that. So, finding 50 locations across those 9 states is really going to be very easy. I think the more challenging piece will be making sure that we get best of breed operators. This is very much of a Chick-fil-A franchise model. Owner operator, heavy vetting of their capabilities and their experiences, and then heavy participation in training and development of the franchisees to assure that they in fact enjoy kind of best in class operating metrics once they're a franchisee.
Thank you. What else? So we have lots of questions here. Let's see what we'll choose one of them. International expansion, I guess somebody's asking here. I guess that's later on down the road, but right now you're focusing on these states.
Yeah. Think of it. Remember, I like to build a playbook in one market. Well, the United States for franchise is our one market. That's where we'll be franchising, and it will certainly initially be these first 50 franchisees, at least the ones that are supported by the fund, will all be east of the Mississippi. That's a decision we made.
And actually, one of the questions here is exactly what I wanted to ask. COVID. So somebody's asking, do you think COVID and its effects will do good with the cannabis industry? By the way, I would have assumed, without being an expert in the space, that, oh yeah, I mean, people are stressed. I would have thought, I mean, I'm not an expert, but how does it really affect you and your company and the industry? And what they're asking here is as well, how does COVID, do you think, will influence it in aspects of awareness, making it free and legal, investment opportunities?
That looks like a question that we would have given ourselves to make us look good, because the answers to those are all very positive. So if you go and look in the general press, what you'll find is that since March, there's been a dramatic increase in both the number of patients registering for medicinal programs in every single state and the average amount per transaction they're spending. That's been primarily driven by baby boomers. Baby boomers are the fastest growing cohort in the cannabis industry. But for example, in Florida, they saw a 30% increase in folks in the program in the second quarter versus the first quarter, the fastest growth they've ever had. They're up to 375,000 registered patients in Florida, and the program is 2 years and 4 months old. So here in Maryland, we saw a real acceleration. We've grown by 60% year over year in patients. And as I said, here in Maryland, we've seen the average transaction go up from about $109 to $135. So I think that, yes, that what's happening is when people are sitting around Zooming with each other, talking on the phone, neighbors are talking to neighbors, relatives are talking to relatives, and they're talking about the benefits they're getting from cannabis for sleep, particularly pain and anxiety. And so people are signing up so they can go participate and not deal with traditional pharmaceuticals, which have all kinds of interactions. One of the things that really struck me about cannabis when I was doing my research back in 2015 was how well it plays in the physiological sandbox. So it doesn't have any negative impact on any major organ. Clearly it's not a product that you want to be giving to children or people with immature brains, but there's been enough evidence now that once your brain is mature, THC has no long-term effects. It has short-term effects, but no long-term effects. So, we're really very, very early in this industry. We think the growth is going to be among the best industries in the United States over the next decade, not just the next 5 years, as the Congress catches up with what citizens want. 98% of Americans favor medicinal cannabis, and 67% favor full legalization. Now, when you get below the kind of the lines there, you learn a lot about who those people are. But there's no question that medicinal is highly favored across the board. There isn't anyone in any cohort at all that doesn't have greater than 50% desire to see that done. And that's really what our focus is the medicinal products.
And I see people writing here. Somebody's writing is super interested, and and that's great. You will be able to connect with Jerel and Michael directly later on for anything else you need. Another question here: is it still too early to build a data analysis company practicing real-world data, patient-reported outcomes, and electronic clinics records analytics? And the same person is asking, how do you see the short-term business strategy? I believe you mentioned it is to raise money for the fund and make sure you get to the right people that are going to be the franchisees, but I'll let you address that.
Yeah, so in the short term, we're going to be focusing on, tripling our capacity here in Maryland. We'll do that out of our own cash flow and probably a small mortgage on this big 100,000 square foot addition, but we're generating a lot of free cash and we'll continue to do so. And then, as I said, we'll do a capital raise probably in the first quarter of next year to build large manufacturing facilities in Florida and in New Jersey. With respect to the fund, we'll be raising a total of $30 million, 27 in limited partnership interests. We've already gotten about a little less than half of that committed in a very short period of time. And we focus primarily on women and minority investors to date because we not only wanted to make a difference in the operators in this industry, but there's also been complaints that women and minority investors haven't been offered this kind of investment to be part of this industry. And so we kind of wanted the first half of the raise to be focused on those folks. And we've actually are very pleased. We have some very famous African-American investors who are well known who have committed to the fund. I can't tell you their name out of confidentiality, but they are world-class investors, and they vetted us, as have a number of family office companies who've also approved and have come into the fund. So we're going to be doing the first closing in about a week, and then we'll do a final closing in October. And we may upsize the fund if the demand is there, because we built this on that model. But we also think there's going to be, multiples of applicants for every one franchise that we fund.
And thinking about the fact you took one pharmacy in Maryland into $1 billion business, it seems like you know what you're talking about, and you're fitting the industry better than many others. Another question here. I'm sorry?
No, I was just going to say, I'm really not interested in the cannabis. I'm interested in medicine. And I'm just a pharma guy who likes to innovate and create a better opportunity for people in terms of their medicine, while driving really great returns to me and my family and my investors.
And maybe a final question here. Somebody's asking in general: is there any formal medical research about? You answered that already. Okay, we answered that question already. So basically,
I apologize. I accidentally dismissed that one. So the question I was looking. Yeah.
Any questions that you guys have, and I saw a lot of questions here that some I asked, some Jerel addressed. You can later on ask directly the company. Again, as always, with interesting guests, we get to do sessions that are hour long, and questions keep on coming. It's kind of more are coming. And then maybe what I would ask at this stage is if you have anything else to add at this stage. Yeah.
Oh, well, I would say this. We are fundraising on a first come, first served basis. We have all of the diligence documents that you're ever going to want available. Jerel is the author of the model and is running the fund, and he and I have worked together now on this is his second tour of duty. He was one of my colleagues at Sterling Partners, where he did extraordinary work in the pharmaceutical field, which is why I recruited him to come and be my partner in this fund. So either of us are available, and if you're interested, we'd welcome you to contact us, and we'll send you a flyer and an NDA, and then we'll FedEx a private placement memorandum to you, and you can decide if this is something that's interesting to you and your family.
Sounds very interesting and great. So I would like to thank you. And it's really rarely that I see companies that are led by such strong entrepreneurs. I can tell you that throughout the years, those were the companies our families loved the most. Uri Levin, the founder of Waze, that built an amazing business and did other companies. Dov Moran, that came from Israel, that invented the flash drive, which is sold for $2 billion and then had a new company. I think when people like real entrepreneurs with real track record behind them adds a very important part to this offering. So before I will let you go, I will just say to our audience here that next week we will be doing our session with a very interesting group called Team 8, basically the veterans of Israel's secret cyber tech and AI unit, 8200. It's very famous for being very quiet. And so that's going to be very, very interesting. And they're probably not going to answer all of my interesting questions. And next month, as some of you know, we're doing what is probably the only event in America this year, let alone in the family office world. And that's thanks to the gracious help that we have from our great friends at the Silverstein family that built the World Trade Center. And they just happen to have New York's largest balcony, which they never rent to anybody else. But when we call them, we touch their soft side and they agree. So next month, we'll be having Shlomo Crow. I believe his father at one point was the largest landlord in America, is one of the most famous families in Dallas, and many others. So that's going to happen September 24th. So I see questions still keep on coming. We will direct them to Jerel and Michael. And I'd like to thank you for being here and sharing with us this great story.
Well,
and,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Denny, we appreciate the time and the interest. And as I said, we're more than happy to have private calls with anyone who'd like. We can do this by Zoom, but if you want to see the real thing, we welcome visits to Baltimore to tour our wellness center. It's really a unique retail experience, and it is very much a healthcare holistic wellness center, but also our manufacturing facility, which is truly unique in the United States, given its GMP status.
Thank you. So again, thank you, Jerel. Thank you, Michael. Stay safe, and we hope to see Michael and Jerel in person at one of our future events. Hopefully 2021 already, we will be back as you all know and like us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. We appreciate it.